So where were you 10 years ago? Were you in school, falling in love, plotting to take over the world or to change it? 10 years ago, I was in school. 10 years ago, many of my classmates would have told you they've never heard my voice, and many of them would have also told you I was probably not going to make it. I would have told you I was not going to make it, because 10 years ago, I was suicidal. Now, being suicidal kind of feels like you're the victim of a home invasion, and your personality has been locked in the basement, and that who you are in social situations has been taken over by this darkness. And you feel like there's no hope, you feel like it's your fault, and you feel like it's not going to change. Now, this feeling of being encompassed by an emotional situation is not unusual. Many people feel out of control with what's happening to them in situations such as when your boss yells at you at work, or when you lose an important friendship or relationship, and even to the death of a family member or friend. The difference comes in the thickness of the doors that lock us in the basement. And the rationale can add to that thickness, and the fact that people suffering from a mental illness like I feel like we don't have a rationale. Now, those doors, they vary in thickness from the quote-unquote average people to people who are struggling a little bit more. And when you have a mental illness and you feel like there's no reason for your feelings, it can add to the thickness of a already thick door. And the stigma and the fact that our society has a hard time talking about mental health and mental illness adds to a thickness to that door even more, to the point that we become Spider-Man. We become superheroes that fight in the darkness alone at night. We don't talk to anyone. We don't tell anyone. We leave small bits of evidence that only make sense in hindsight. Now, many of you might be wondering, why don't you talk? Why don't you talk about it if it adds this pain to your being? Now, to explain this, I want to tell you a story. And I actually went to my friend's house, and we were making dinner in her kitchen. She's actually here today. And I noticed that her behavior towards this new box in her kitchen was rather strange. She kind of would avoid it, stay to the other side of the room, or make awkward motions around the box. As the evening progressed, I started to figure out why she was acting that way towards the box. The box was full of worms. Gross, disgusting, I do not do well with worms. And then I noticed that I started avoiding the box, that I started getting creeped out by it. Then I realized the box functions perfectly well as a box. When I was leaving things on top of it, it was holding it up fine. And then I drew a parallel to how people treat me when they find out that I have a mental illness. Before they find out, they treat me like a normal person. After they find out, some of people continue to treat me like a normal person, but many people will either get really grossed out and go, nah. Other people will be like, I don't believe you. And other people will be like, oh my God, I'm never leaving you alone ever again. And the problem comes with how we speak about mental illness in our society and what that label means. And how most of our media literacy and what's in our TV shows and what's in our media is the extremes. It is the less than 1%. It is the people who take guns and shoot children in schools. But those are the extremes. What you don't realize, or what people may not realize, is that 20% of the Canadian population has a mental illness, but 2 out of 3 people will never get help for it because of this, because they're scared to be associated with this label, with crazy. Now, on my journey, I felt this. I had many people say things to me like, you're just crazy, or, why don't you try exercise? Why don't you try go for a run? That'll make it better. Why don't you eat some candy? Or, your family, they're pretty well off. They're sending you to university and you don't have to pay for it. Well, why don't you just get better already? Then, as this time went on and I felt this misunderstanding, and I kind of felt deeper and deeper into that basement. And the thing is about the basement is that there's always a small part of you that wants to get out, but the longer that you're fighting, the less of that part is there. And so I decided that, well, maybe no one will be able to help me. And I tried to hide it and to pretend like nothing was wrong. And one of the many times I reached out for treatment, I was in a treatment center. And a woman comes up to me, seeing me sitting down with my normal, kind of not caring demeanor. And she says, "From one crazy person to another, you'll need this." And she handed me a necklace that said hope. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, hope. I haven't had hope since I hoped for cookies as a kid. It seems strange, but it had been so absent from my life. And I was trying to work in my mind some way to incorporate this in my life, to find something to hope for and to make a journey to get there. And as I was sitting there thinking, the woman's daughter comes up to me and she says, "I'm so sorry, my mom's in a manic phase and she's giving away her stuff. Can I please have the necklace back?" This is a true accidental superhero. She has absolutely no idea the impact that she had on my life and the fact that she saved me. Because after that moment, I started to hope for something. I hoped to watch my sister graduate from high school, which she did 2 years ago. And Victoria, if you're watching, I got the years right this time. Thank you. And once I started to have a hope and have a way to get there, I started talking, and talking became so important. One person, two people, professionals, my friends. And as I started talking, lights started going off, and the demons that I was fighting, they were full of holes. They weren't bound in reality. And when I realized this, I got so annoyed with the fact that we don't talk. And I decided, you know what? I'm sick of being Spider-Man. I'm sick of being the accidental superhero that hides. I'm going to be Iron Man. I'm going to be the superhero that fights in the open and shows people this is what I am. I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I'm average, and yes, I have a mental illness. But the important part of this message is that to anyone in this audience and to anyone who watches this who's suffering with a mental illness, a part of the journey of moving forward past stigmas on us, we have to start talking, whether it's 200, or 2,000 people, and how awkward and scary it can be. When you start talking, you start the dialogue, and you start disproving those myths. So many of you may be wondering, and I know Matt definitely was when I was talking to him about my idea, how is this related to me? I don't have a mental illness, and I don't think I know anyone with one. And as Matt said to me, how are you going to make an average person care? And I said, in my mind, oh good, that's the question my industry has been trying to figure out for 60 years. And I went to London to work with a charity that I'm very fond of called mindyourmind.ca. And the lady there said, what changes minds? And then we came to the idea that it's when you put intentions behind your actions. Many of you in this audience have been an accidental superhero already. For me, it was the hope necklace. For many other of my friends, it was that person who walked them to school, that person who sat them down for coffee, or that person that looked at them and goes, but how are you really? And so what I want you guys to do is to think of something, big or small, that you can do to help someone with a mental illness. Now, it can be listening. It can be simply just asking them what they want from you. Or if it scares you, it can be something small. Take them for coffee and remind them that you're their friend. Remind them that you can make them laugh, because they do laugh. And remind them that somewhere underneath that is that person trying to get out. And sometimes we have to entertain them too. So I'm just going to ask you to take that moment and to think of something. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do is to tweet, Facebook, or tell your neighbor something that you can do to help someone with a mental illness. And if you can't think of someone now, there may be someone in the future. Because like I said, it's so much of our population is suffering. Now, to explain this idea a little bit more of the audience being intentional superheroes, of the audience helping burst down those basement doors, because when you do something with somebody else with more than one superhero, that door does not stand a chance. I'm going to tell you my story of being an intentional superhero. So I was on a train. If any of you are from Toronto, you know this is the GO train. And I was talking to my friend loudly about suicide prevention. No surprise. And all of a sudden, as I got off the train, this guy just started to follow me. And I said, "What is the steps to beat this guy up again?" Then I realized he wanted to talk to me. And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I've never heard someone speak so openly about suicide prevention and being suicidal. I've been suicidal for a really long time." And as him and I were going back and forth, sharing resources, telling stories about hope and not being alone, I realized that my dad's car had pulled up and I had to leave. So I made sure he was going to be safe, and I said, "Are you sure you're going to be okay?" And he says, "Yes." And I says, "I want to thank you." I say, "For what?" He says, "If I hadn't heard your stories today, and if I hadn't heard you speaking so openly about suicide prevention, I was going to jump in front of the train." Thank you. Thank you. So I want to leave you with the message today that you can all be intentional superheroes, that you can all be Iron Men and women, but that even though we can't help everyone, we can all help someone, even if that someone is just ourselves. Thank you.